Hi, I'm Nush from YB Aligned, and for this week's Movement Monday, we are looking at the wrists. The wrist is the joint that connects the lower arm or the forearm to our hand, and as you can see here, it consists of 8 bones, which we call the carpal bones. This video here from Anatomy app, it's great at showing you how that lower row of carpal bones move around on top of those forearm bones. When you watch the video, you can see that the wrist is doing this 360-degree move, which we call circumduction. Now, technically, the wrist can only move in 2 planes of motion, so let's take a bit of a closer look at that. In our sagittal or side-on plane, the wrist is able to flex where the hand is coming forward and then extend where the hand is going backwards. And in our frontal or front-on plane, when the wrist comes towards the thumb, that is called radial deviation or abduction. And when it goes towards the little finger, that's our ulnar deviation or our ADD, adduction. The rotational movement of the wrist is slightly different. You can see here this video from Anatomy of Motion. It's actually the lower or forearm bones that are rotating, and they are then moving along the wrist versus the wrist bones themselves moving. How can you test your range of motion or see if you've got good movement in the wrists? In your sagittal or side-on plane, you're simply going to hold your arms out straight ahead of you. So I'm going to come off camera for this, and you can see my wrists. You will start with them straight out, and with your flexion, which is where they are bending forwards, you want to be achieving between 70 to 90 degrees of flexion. 90 would obviously be a right angle to the floor. And with your extension, you're looking about 65 to 90 degree range. I definitely have better flexion in my wrist than I do extension. Now, one thing to note here is that naturally, if we are flexing our wrist, the fingers will have a tendency to want to straighten. And if we are extending our wrists, the fingers will have a tendency to want to bend. This is a natural connection in our movement. So you might find that as you are doing this test, as you're doing this, your fingers are wanting to bend, and you can let them bend a bit to get a good idea of what is happening at that wrist joint. So with our frontal plane, I obviously showed it to you like this. The reason it's frontal or front-on plane is because anatomically, when we're looking at neutral, it would be with the arm down by your side facing forward. So if I'm taking my wrist side to side, then that you can see front on. But the best way to do this is to simply have your arms bent with your elbows tucked into your wrists. And then for your radial deviation, think about your thumbs going away from the body, so they are deviating away. That's our abduction. And then for your ulnar deviation, this is where the little fingers are coming in towards your body. And see if you can keep your palms flat to the ceiling while you do that. You can see in my wrists, they want to get a little bit of rotation in there, which means I'm not technically just moving in one plane of motion. So have a little feel in yourself. You can feel free to try it palms facing the floor as well and see if that's any easier or harder. But I would always say compare what movement you've got available in your left to your right. And if you did want to test your range of motion in the rotational plane, again, you would have this right angle in your arms with your elbows tucked into your rib cage, and you're just going to think of like a laser beam coming out of your middle finger, so it's staying pointing straight ahead, and then either with one hand or both hands at the same time, you're going to rotate the palms towards the floor and see if you can keep going, so it's like the thumbs are wanting to touch down towards the floor. And then you're going to rotate the palms towards the ceiling and see if they want to keep going away a little bit more, so it's like you're getting a bit of a diagonal in the hand. And so what's happening is those forearm bones are crossing over each other and uncrossing, crossing over and uncrossing, but it gives us this sense of rotation in the wrists. So we know everything is connected. If you do not have good range of motion in your wrists in one or more plane of motion, and that could be one or both wrists, then it will affect things further up the body. That could be an elbow issue, it could be a shoulder that's overcompensating, it could even be something in your spine or further up or down. So it is essential that we get some good movement into the wrists. For the radial and ulnar deviation, quite simply doing this as a practice is great, taking it side to side. But for our extension and flexion of the wrist, so the opening and closing, and for the rotation of the forearm, there's a really wonderful movement that I'm going to show you. I love this movement. I actually borrowed it from a lady called Helen Hall. If you don't know her, do go and look her up. She's fantastic. And I call this one Spider-Man Goose because that's what it reminds me of. So it's a two-parter. You're going to start by supporting one elbow in your other hand, and you're going to start by thinking about making a goose with your hand, or a goose beak. So your thumb is going to come in, and you're going to take your fingers, your straight fingers, and make almost like a beak here. This is why it reminds me of a goose. So I've got my elbow bent, and I'm really bending this wrist forward, flexing the wrist here into this beak position. I'm going to bring my hand a little bit lower so you can see what's happening. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your thumb out to the side, and the thumb is going to come over the top and rotate the wrist. So now we've got that wrist rotation happening, or that lower forearm rotation happening. And what is now happening is my wrist is starting to open or extend, and I'm getting these cupped fingers. Now, I'm going to think about being Spider-Man here. If I had webs in my wrist, I want to shoot them out. I'm going to really flex that wrist backwards and let the web come out. And you can see that's really giving me some bend in these fingers. And your thumb is coming out to the side as you do this. You're then going to take your thumb back over the top, in underneath the fingers, and pull yourself into that lovely wrist flexion. And then over the top again, rotate the hand, really shoot the web, so extending and opening that wrist and letting those fingers come down and back. And that is our goose Spider-Man. So that is Movement Monday of the wrists. You now know the movements the wrists can make in 3 planes of motion, and you also know why they're beneficial for the body and how to encourage the movements back into the wrists. And that actually concludes this section of Movement Monday. Do be sure to look out for a future series, which is going to be Movement Monday, the connections within the body. You saw there how the wrists and fingers connected when we moved. Well, there's a lot of those connections that happen in the body. If one joint isn't moving in a certain way, then sometimes it means the other joint can't also move. So as much as you're trying to, say, flex the wrist, if the fingers won't work well, then the wrist can't flex, and vice versa. We know it's all connected, so look out for Movement Monday, the connections.